The 34th annual NBA draft took place in June, with the expansion Dallas Mavericks on the board for the first time. Major League Baseball also held their draft in June and followed with the All-Star Game in July. A scoring record was set in the U.S. Open, a recap of Wimbledon, and much more in the June and July 1980 edition of Back in Time Sports. Leading up to the 34th edition of the NBA draft, the Boston Celtics held the first pick due to a previous trade with the Detroit Pistons. The Celtics had interest in Virginia freshman Ralph Sampson, but with Sampson choosing to stay in college, the Celtics traded the pick the day before the draft, along with the 13th pick to Golden State, in exchange for center Robert Parrish and the 3rd overall pick. Golden State then used the first pick to select Purdue center Joe Barry Carroll. Utah chose Darryl Griffith with the 2nd pick, and Boston took Kevin McHale with the 3rd pick. The expansion Dallas Mavericks took Kiki Vandeweghe with the 11th overall pick in the first round. There were 10 rounds in this year's draft, and many analysts questioned the need for so many picks. Last year, there were also 10 rounds, and only 3 players out of the 94 drafted after the 5th round played in an NBA game. 3 years ago, there were only 8 rounds, but some creative picks emerged late in the draft. The Utah Jazz selected Lucia Harris, the first woman officially selected in an NBA draft. Denise Long was drafted in 1969, but the league voided the pick. The Los Angeles Lakers were a little too rigid in sticking to their draft board when they selected a wooden chair. The NBA axed that pick. The animated Lakers then decided to go off their board and selected Scooby-Doo. And they would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for the meddling NBA executives who voided that pick as well. The draft was broadcast for the first time on television on the USA Network, a national cable channel. 1,000 spectators also witnessed the picks in the New York Sheraton Hotel, greeting Commissioner Larry O'Brien with boos and each New York Knicks pick with cheers. Utah General Manager Frank Layden also gave a surprisingly candid interview before the draft with a local news station. The NBA also approved new rules for this year, including the permanent adoption of the three-point goal and installation of a red light behind each backboard to aid officials in determining if a field goal attempt was made before a period or half ends. The 16th annual Major League Baseball draft wasn't broadcast on television, but began on June 3rd with the New York Mets selecting Darryl Strawberry, a high school outfielder from Los Angeles, with the 1st overall pick. Strawberry had signed a letter of intent with Oklahoma State, but decided to turn pro and in July signed a contract with the Mets. Darryl's brother Michael Strawberry was also drafted, taken in the 31st round by the Los Angeles Dodgers. The San Diego Padres chose Jeff Pyburn with the 5th pick in the first round. Pyburn was also selected in the 5th round of the NFL draft by the Buffalo Bills. The quarterback and outfielder, whose father Jim played for the Orioles in the mid-50s, decided to sign with the Padres. The Major League Baseball All-Star Game was played on July 8th at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, with the National League having won the last 8 games and 16 of the last 17. Dodger Stadium unveiled an impressive new piece of technology for the game, a $3 million all-color telescreen called Diamond Vision. George Brett, Paul Molitor, and Jim Rice in the AL, and Mike Schmidt in the NL were voted as starters but did not play because of injuries. The game was televised on ABC with Keith Jackson, Al Michaels, Howard Cosell, and Don Drysdale calling the game. Vin Scully and Brent Musburger called the game on radio for CBS. J.R. Richard of the Houston Astros and Steve Stone of the Baltimore Orioles were the starting pitchers. The game was scoreless until the 5th inning when Fred Lynn hit a 2-run homer over the right field wall. The National League's first hit of the game was a home run by Ken Griffey in the bottom of the 5th. The NL added 3 more runs to win their 9th straight All-Star game 4-2. Griffey was named the game's MVP. There were several notable regular season games in Major League Baseball over the summer. On July 9th, the Giants defeated the Phillies 3-1 in 9 innings. The result wasn't unusual, but what made the game notable is that in the middle of the 4th inning, it was delayed an hour and 28 minutes due to rain. Then after 4 batters in the bottom of the 4th, it was delayed another 3 hours and 32 minutes, resuming at 1:28 a.m. The game finally ended almost 2 hours later at 3:11 a.m. with about 200 fans sticking it out until the end. Even more remarkable was that after 5 hours on the bench, Phillies starter Steve Carlton remained in the game and pitched 2 more innings. Carlton had a perfect game in progress when the game was suspended, so maybe it wasn't too surprising he wanted to keep pitching. On June 20th, the Angels beat the Red Sox in Boston by a score of 20-2. To sum up the Angels' batting highlights, every player in the lineup had at least 2 hits and scored at least 1 run. Freddie Patek led the way with 4 hits, 3 home runs, and 7 RBIs. And to top it off, Frank Tanana threw a complete game for the Angels, giving up only 5 hits and 1 walk. On June 27th, Jerry Royce threw the 205th no-hitter in Major League history. A first-inning error was the only play that kept Royce from a perfect game. It was the first no-hitter of the year and the first since Ken Forsch accomplished the feat last year. Ken's brother Bob also threw a no-hitter 2 years ago. Whitey Herzog was hired as the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals on June 8th after the Cardinals had lost 21 of their last 26 games. Herzog was fired as manager of the Kansas City Royals last year after finishing second in the AL West. The previous 3 years, Herzog led the Royals to 3 straight AL West titles. The Toronto Blue Jays invited NHL MVP Wayne Gretzky to a tryout. The 19-year-old plays in a semi-pro baseball league in Southern Ontario during the hockey offseason and is currently batting .500. Gretzky's priority is hockey, but has said if he could play both professionally, he would do it. The Summer Olympics opened in Moscow on July 19th, but the United States was one of 66 countries that boycotted the Games due to the Soviet-Afghan War. Among the athletes that qualified in the Olympic trials but did not get a chance to compete was Edwin Moses. 2 weeks before the Olympics started, Moses set a world record in the 400-meter hurdles for the third time, with a time of 47.13 seconds in Milan, Italy. Also qualifying in the trials was 19-year-old Carl Lewis in the long jump and on the 4x100 relay team. The freshman from the University of Houston won the long jump in the NCAA championships with a jump of 27 feet 4 3/4 inches. It would have been an NCAA record, except the wind was over the allowable limit. Willie Gault, a 19-year-old freshman wide receiver on the Tennessee Volunteer football team, also qualified for the Olympics, but had to settle for a medal in the Liberty Bell Classic, which was held in Philadelphia as an alternative to the Olympic Games. Gault won the bronze medal in the 100-meter dash. Cyclist Greg LeMond was the youngest athlete ever to qualify for the Olympic cycling team, and diver Greg Louganis, who won a silver medal in the 1976 Olympics in the 10-meter platform, was a favorite for multiple gold medals this year. Both athletes will have to wait 4 more years for a chance at the Olympic podium. The United States Congress did vote to authorize $50,000 to strike 650 gold-plated medals to give to U.S. athletes barred from competing. A teenager from Cincinnati wasn't on the Olympic team, but put up a time that would have won gold in Moscow. 15-year-old Mary Mager won the 100-meter butterfly in the U.S. Swimming Championship with a time of 59.41 seconds. It wasn't even her personal record. She holds the world record time of 59.26 seconds. In PGA news, the 1980 U.S. Open took place in June at Baltusrol Golf Club in Springfield, New Jersey. Last year's champ Hale Irwin was back in the field, below amateur Fred Couples was not. The favorites were Tom Watson and Jack Nicklaus, who won the U.S. Open at this course 13 years ago in 1967. Two-time winner Lee Trevino and Masters champion Seve Ballesteros were also in the field. The first round started with record-low scores of 7 under par by Jack Nicklaus and Tom Weiskopf. The second round had Nicklaus as the sole leader at 6 under par with a 2-stroke lead over 4 other players. A major story of the round was Seve Ballesteros, the reigning British and Masters champion, being disqualified for being late to the first tee. Arriving 7 minutes late, Ballesteros was disqualified since his playing partners Hale Irwin and amateur Marco Mira had already struck their second shot. After the third round, Japanese golfer Isao Aoki moved into a tie with Nicklaus at 6 under, with 4 players within 2 strokes, including Watson. The final round saw Keith Fergus pull even with Nicklaus on the 7th hole, but after the 10th hole, Nicklaus pushed his lead back to 2 strokes and held it there to win the tournament. The winning total of 272 broke the U.S. Open record by 3 strokes. It was Nicklaus's first tournament win in 23 months and his 16th major championship win. In July, the 109th Open Championship began in Scotland, and the first round finished with 12 players within 2 strokes of the lead. Lee Trevino and Tom Watson were tied for the lead, with Scottish golfers Ken Brown and Sandy Lyle both in contention. Lee Trevino, a 2-time Open champion, took a 3-stroke lead in the second round. In the third round, Tom Watson shot a 7 under par to take a 4-stroke lead and held on in the final round to win by the same margin. It was Watson's 5th major championship and his 3rd at the Open. The 94th Wimbledon Championships got underway in June with much pomp and circumstance. The men's singles bracket had 128 competitors, with the top 16 being seeded. The first-seeded player to be upset was the 14th seed Victor Amaya, who lost in the first round to his doubles partner Henk Pfister. It was 2 years ago at Wimbledon that Amaya, the 6'7" hard-serving left-hander, had a 2-1 lead over Bjorn Borg in the first round, but ended up losing the final 2 sets to the eventual champion. In the Wimbledon doubles bracket this year, Amaya and Pfister did advance to the quarterfinals, but lost to brothers Jean and Sandy Mayer, who were the doubles champions at last year's French Open. The top 3 seeds all made the semifinals in the men's singles bracket, with the top 2 seeds Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe making the final. In official ATP matches, Borg held a 4-3 lead in head-to-head matches against McEnroe, and had also won 4 straight Wimbledon singles titles. The final match did not disappoint, as McEnroe jumped out to an early lead, winning the first set 6-1, but Borg fought back to win the next 2 sets. The fourth set was an instant classic, with McEnroe saving 7 match points before eventually winning the tiebreak 18-16. Borg won a close 5th set to win his 5th straight Wimbledon singles championship in the marathon match that lasted 3 hours and 53 minutes. In the women's singles, the top 4 seeds all advanced to the semifinals, but with a few scares along the way. The most notable was the quarterfinal matchup between doubles partners Martina Navritalova and Billie Jean King. The number 1 seed and the winner of the last 2 Wimbledon singles titles, Navritalova, won the 3rd set 10-8 to advance. King has won a record 20 Wimbledon titles, 6 singles, 10 doubles, and 4 mixed doubles, but did not add to her record count this year. In the semifinals, both matches went to 3 sets, with the top 2 seeds both losing. Navratilova lost to Chris Evert-Lloyd, and Tracy Austin lost to Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley. The 17-year-old Austin was attempting to become the youngest women's singles champion in over 90 years, but had to settle for winning the mixed doubles title with her brother John. In the singles title, Goolagong-Cawley won a tiebreaker in the second set to win the title 9 years after her first Wimbledon title in 1971. The College World Series has been dominated by 2 teams in the last couple of decades, with either Arizona State or Southern California winning 14 of 22 titles since 1958. Neither team was in the series this year, and Arizona defeated Hawaii 5-3 in the final game to win their second championship. Arizona, who was making their 11th appearance in the World Series, lost their first game to the strong pitching of Frank Viola of St. John's, but won out through the losers bracket and ended up beating Hawaii twice to win the title. Terry Francona of Arizona was named the tournament's most outstanding player. In horse racing, Genuine Risk was the second filly to win the Kentucky Derby, and the first in the last 65 years. She also finished second in both the Preakness Stakes and the Belmont Stakes. Codex, the winner of the Preakness, not only flew around the track, but also flew from California to Baltimore a few days before the race, and flying horses are becoming more common. About 30,000 horses take plane rides each year. Flights for horses began in 1950 and has become a big business. It costs about $1,400 for a horse to fly commercially, but chartered flights can cost less with an increase of the number of horses on board. Sedatives are available for the horses if the turbulence upsets them. The annual Little League World Series took place in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, with the final game matching the U.S. team from Tampa, Florida, with the international team from Hualien, Taiwan. Taiwan has dominated the series in recent years, with championships in 8 of the last 11 years. Both teams cruised to the finals, with Taiwan pitching shutouts in both the quarterfinals and semifinals, and Florida scoring 36 runs in those 2 rounds. After vice presidential nominee George Bush threw out the first pitch, Taiwan edged out Florida 4-3 to win the series. Florida hit .449 as a team in the tournament, and were led by shortstop Ty Griffin, right fielder Derek Bell, and catcher Gary Sheffield. In the final game, Griffin was 1 for 2 with a home run, Derek Bell had an RBI, and Gary Sheffield was 1 for 3 with a run scored. In June, former lightweight champion Roberto Duran faced unbeaten welterweight champion Sugar Ray Leonard in a title fight billed as the Brawl in Montreal. Leonard was almost a 2-1 favorite entering the fight, but the underdog was the aggressor in a hard-fought contest, and Duran won in a 15-round unanimous decision. The tape delay broadcast earned the highest rating in the 19-year history of ABC's Wide World of Sports. Armchair quarterbacks got a chance to call plays for the semi-professional Columbus Metros football team in a cable television experiment. The Cube system gives viewers of designated programs the ability to react to what they are watching by pressing one of 5 response buttons linked to a central computer system. The plays that received the largest amount of votes were relayed to the coaching staff. It was a good start as Columbus scored a touchdown in the first quarter, but the couch coaches could not sustain the success and Columbus lost to Racine 10-7. The NBA is investing in a developmental league by providing $190,000 to the Continental Basketball Association in exchange for the right to take any CBA player at any time. According to CBA Commissioner James Drucker, the CBA accounts for more players in the NBA than any college except for UCLA. Sadaharu Oh, the most popular sports star in Japan, hit the 850th home run of his career in June. Oh has played his entire career with the Yomiuri Giants, and like Babe Ruth, began his professional career as a pitcher. He soon moved to first base and quickly improved his hitting skills. In 1974, shortly after Hank Aaron became the Major League Baseball home run king, Aaron and O faced off in a home run derby in Tokyo, with Aaron winning 10-9. Using a borrowed Meadow Muffin, San Diego Chargers reserve linebacker Keith King won the Southern California Exposition's Cal Chip throwing contest with a toss of over 203 feet. King finished in third place last year, but with this year's victory he qualified for the national championship in Beaver, Oklahoma. That's all for June and July 1980. Looking ahead to the next episode, a preview of the NFL and college football seasons and results from the first month of play. The Major League Baseball season nears its end with division titles on the line. A legend attempts to add to his career records, and much more on the August and September 1980 edition of Back in Time Sports.